Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking at what you could call a breakout year for a major player in the RNAi space, Arrowhead Pharmaceuticals. Ticker is ARWR.
Yeah, this is more than just another earnings report. We're digging into their fiscal Q4 and full year 2025 results, which dropped on November 25th.
And our mission here is to really unpack how a massive financial transformation driven completely by deal-making has just reset the entire story for this company.
Exactly. It's positioned them for their first product launch and basically lets them self-fund a super aggressive late-stage pipeline.
So let's start with the numbers, because they're almost hard to believe. The headline beat was just enormous.
Enormous is the right word. Q4 2025 revenue came in at $256.5 million.
Yeah.
The consensus on the street, it was somewhere between like 147 and 180 million.
So they didn't just beat, they absolutely crushed estimates. We're talking 40, maybe even 75% above expectations.
On the top line, yeah. And that's usually the kind of beat you see from a commercial blockbuster that's on fire, not a company like this.
Right. And the full year picture really shows the step change.
It really does. Full year revenue for fiscal 2025 was $829.4 million. Now, just for comparison, try to wrap your head around this.
Okay.
In fiscal 2024, it was $3.6 million. That's an increase of roughly 23,000% year over year.
23,000. And that's all from license and collaboration deals, right? Not selling a product.
Exactly. It's pure validation of their science, not their sales team. And it got them to basically break even for the year, a net loss of just $1.6 million.
Which is, what, a penny a share after losing almost $600 million the year before?
It's a total re-rating of the company's entire financial profile.
Yeah.
And the market definitely noticed.
Oh, I bet. So the options market was pricing in, what, a 16 or 17% move?
Something like plus or minus 16.5%, yeah. They were expecting fireworks. But the stock actually closed up about 23.3% the next day.
Wow. So it blew past even the most aggressive expectation.
A huge catalyst-driven rally.
So that brings up the obvious question. If it wasn't from selling drugs, how on earth did they generate almost $1 billion?
Pure, high-value business development. It really came from two main transactions hitting key milestones.
Okay.
First, they got $300 million in milestones from Sarepta, all tied to good progress in their ARO-DM1 trial.
And the second?
A big $200 million upfront payment from Novartis for ARO-SNCA. That's their program targeting Parkinson's disease.
And it seems like this isn't just a one-off thing either. They mentioned another $200 million milestone from Sarepta that came in right after the quarter closed.
Yeah, it shows consistent validation.
Yeah.
And that cash it's like a fortress for their R&D. They ended the quarter with $781.5 million in cash.
Which they need, because their spending went up a lot, right? Ramping up all those phase 3 trials.
For sure. R&D and G&A climbed to over $731 million. But even with that burn, management is now guiding that their cash runway is extended well into fiscal 2028.
Into 2028. So they've basically bought themselves years of freedom to execute without needing to go back to the market.
That's the game changer. And it's critical because fiscal 2025 also marked their big transition into a commercial company with the FDA approval of REDEMPLO.
The key pivot. So REDEMPLO, or Plozasiran, is approved for Familial Chylomicronemia syndrome, FCS.
Right, their very first marketed product. A huge moment for them. And the data was, frankly, outstanding. The phase 3 showed an 80% reduction in triglycerides.
And more importantly, an 83% reduction in pancreatitis risk. For these patients, that's the outcome that really, really matters.
It's life-threatening, absolutely.
But FCS is an ultra-rare disease. We're talking maybe 6,500 people in the U.S. So how are they thinking about the launch with such a small patient pool?
The strategy seems to be all about setting a pricing precedent. Management kept talking about this one REDEMPLO pricing model.
Okay, what does that mean?
They set the wholesale price at $60,000 a year. The idea is to establish that value now for preventing pancreatitis so that the price holds when they expand to a much bigger indication.
Which is severe hypertriglyceridemia, or SHTG. That's the real prize here.
That is the whole commercial story right now, moving from 6,500 patients to the much, much larger SHTG population.
So what's the timeline for that expansion?
They're running two big phase 3s, SHASTA-3 and SHASTA-4. They expect to have those wrapped up by mid-2026, with top-line data coming in the second half of the year.
And if that data is good, they file an SNDA.
Yep, a supplemental new drug application.
Yep.
The target is to submit that by the end of 2026. If it's approved, you're looking at a market that goes from 6,500 people to potentially 750,000 high-risk patients in the U.S.
That's a franchise-making kind of expansion. But there's a regulatory risk here, right? Something they brought up on the call about the pancreatitis claim.
A very important nuance, yes. They got the pancreatitis risk reduction claim for FCS, which is huge. But they confirmed they have not yet discussed getting that same claim with the FDA for the SHTG population.
So the current trials, Shasta 3 and 4, they're based on triglyceride lowering as the main endpoint.
Exactly. They're running another huge study, Shasta 5, just to prove the pancreatitis outcome, but that data is further out. So there's this bit of regulatory uncertainty. The uptake could be very different if the SHTG label is just for TG lowering versus preventing pancreatitis.
That's a key risk that the market might be glossing over in all the excitement. Okay, let's pivot from REDEMPLO because the call also got into some really exciting next-gen platform stuff.
This is where, the long-term story gets really interesting. Let's start with ARO-DimerPA in cardiovascular.
This is the dual target therapeutic, right?
Exactly. A single molecule designed to silence two genes at the same time. PCSK9, which nukes bad LDL cholesterol, and APOC3, which crushes triglycerides.
So it's a one-shot solution for patients with mixed hyperlipidemia who have both high LDL and high triglycerides.
And that's a massive population, so like 20 million people in the US alone. If this works, it's a major, major disruption.
A single quarterly shot to solve two big problems. When do we see the first human data on that?
Summer 2026. That's going to be an absolutely critical catalyst.
Okay, now let's talk about the central nervous system, the CNS pipeline, because the tech breakthrough here seems even more profound. They updated on ARO-MAPT for things like Alzheimer's.
Yeah, and here the story is really the delivery system. It's a new proprietary system that in primate studies achieved more than 75% knockdown of the target gene across the entire central nervous system.
And the really wild part.
It was after a simple subcutaneous injection, a shot in the arm.
Wait, a shot in the arm to get drug across the blood-brain barrier and all through the CNS? Not like a spinal tap?
Not an invasive procedure. If that translates to humans, and we'll see the first data on that also in summer 2026, it just fundamentally changes how you can treat neurological diseases with RNAi.
That's a deep bench of massive catalysts all lining up. Were there any setbacks or delays mentioned at all?
Only a very minor one. They acknowledged a slight delay for their early obesity programs, ARO-IHBE and ARO-AP7.
What was the reason?
Just operational timing, all of these, that sort of thing. So initial phase 1 data that was expected at the end of 2025 will now slip into early January 2026. It's a small bump, nothing that changes the big picture.
So let's synthesize this. A 23% pop in the stock. The market is clearly voting that this is a story of great execution. What's the big takeaway?
The big takeaway is that the company has graduated. The market is betting on the long game. The deal revenue, the FDA approval, and that cash runway into 2028, it all validates the core platform.
So the stock move is about de-risking the pipeline and the future optionality, not so much about near-term REDEMPLO sales.
Precisely. But the buy-side analysts are still pointing out some reasons for caution, which is fair.
What are the main points of concern?
3 things, really. 1, management didn't give any detailed sales guidance for 2026. 2, everyone knows near-term revenue from the tiny FCS population will be modest. And 3, that regulatory uncertainty around the SHTG pancreatitis claim we talked about.
The market is pricing in a lot of good news.
A lot of perfect execution, for sure.
Which takes us perfectly into our next segment. We're going to step into the shoes of a very aggressive hedge fund analyst with an idea. And as always, we have to stress this is absolutely not financial advice.
Okay, so the thesis here is that the 23% stock pop was a reaction to things that have already happened. The approval, the cash. The next multi-billion-dollar jump in value has to come from validating the platform for huge populations.
And which program gives you the most leverage for that?
It's got to be ARO-DimerPA for mixed hyperlipidemia, that 20 million patient market. If they can prove that one shot can meaningfully hit both LDL and triglycerides in humans, it opens up a whole new world for RNAi.
So what's the actual trade idea?
It's a leverage bet on that proof of concept. The play would be to buy long-dated, deep-in-the-money call options, something like the January 2027 expirations.
To give you time for the catalyst to play out.
Exactly. It's a highly leveraged, defined risk bet on that single data readout in summer 2026.
And the trigger for the big return is just positive data.
It's confirmation that the dual targeting works in humans. If that data is good, it immediately de-risks the entire dimer platform. It opens up that massive cardio market, and you'll likely see a major re-rating or huge new partnership harvest long before that drug ever gets to market.
It's a bet on the science, not the sales.
A pure bet on platform innovation.
Well, that definitely lays out the risk and reward. So to recap our deep dive, a truly transformational year for Arrowhead. Over $829 million in deal revenue, a first FDA approval, and a cash position that lets them chase these huge opportunities.
Right, but I think the most provocative thought to leave you with goes back to that CNS delivery system, the ARO-MAPT program.
The subcutaneous injection for a CNS disease.
Yeah. We talked about the primate data. If that translates to humans, and we get the first hint of that in summer 2026, ask yourself this question. Doesn't that de-risk the entire concept of using subcutaneous RNAi for neurological disorders? If a shot in the arm can silence genes in the brain, it opens up a universe of targets well beyond Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. That's the real long-term prize they're now funded to go after.
Something to mull over until our next deep dive.
Absolutely.
And as always, nothing we discuss today constitutes financial advice. This analysis is purely for informational purposes. Thank you for tuning in.